I used to believe safety lived in quiet places, neat lawns, locked doors, familiar faces. I was wrong. The most dangerous moment of my life didn't happen in an alley or on a highway. It happened 3 steps inside my own garage, under 2 flickering LED strips, and the smell of grilled chicken. And the woman pointing her phone at us thought she was the hero. She said one sentence that split the night in half. One lie can breathe faster than any truth. I didn't know whether to close the door or my eyes. Because if police really came, they wouldn't meet a party, they'd meet a story already poisoned. My name is Ion. I rent a small house in an HOA neighborhood that advertises peace like a product. The kind of street where even cats look disciplined. I follow the rules, mostly. You learn to survive HOAs the way you survive weather, by adjusting, not arguing. That Friday I adjusted too much. Samir, my younger brother, had returned after months away. Family reunions need walls that remember laughter. My cousin Bilal insisted the garage was perfect. Private, humble, ours. In our culture, garages are halfway homes. I didn't want trouble. I wanted normal with extra spice. I turned the space into something almost respectable: chairs borrowed from my aunt, a cooler older than my ambitions, a portable grill that coughed smoke like an uncle giving advice. By sunset, the garage looked less like storage and more like forgiveness. Guests arrived carrying food and stories. Every knock felt like a gift. Samir's friends came together, calm and polite, introducing themselves with careful smiles. They thanked me too sincerely. Gratitude can sometimes feel suspicious. Bilal joked they looked like movie extras cast as responsible adults. I laughed, pretending I wasn't counting how many knew the exit without asking. The music wasn't loud, just alive. The grill argued with the ceiling. Life felt manageable. Then she appeared at the edge of the driveway like a storm wearing perfume. Window from 2 houses down, blonde bob, designer sandals, permanent disapproval. She walked her dog as if the dog also judged us. Her phone rose slowly, a small moon of threat. I greeted her kindly because fear often borrows manners. She asked if we had permission for this gathering. Permission is her favorite flavor. I said it was family only. She looked past me into the garage. Her eyes changed language. She whispered into her phone before speaking to us again. Words have shadows too. I remember the dog barking once, confused. She said she felt unsafe. She said the street had standards. Then she said the sentence. I'm calling 911. There are armed men in this garage. The air folded itself smaller. My mom was inside the house ironing clothes she would never finish. Samir stepped beside me and told me quietly to stay calm. Calm is expensive during accusation sales. What none of us realized was that the lie was walking into the wrong garage. The men behind me weren't criminals. They were off-duty police officers from Samir's training program, invited to celebrate his graduation. The alert posture finally made sense too late. I didn't know that detail yet. I only knew sirens were seeds and she had just planted a field. And that's when the patrol car at the corner turned its lights on without sound. Suspense can arrive before explanation. Bilal squeezed my shoulder. Samir exhaled like a plan was already in motion. The woman kept recording, confident history would obey her. The garage door was still half open, the way mistakes prefer it. The sirens reached us like rumors riding red S. Sound changes shape when it's coming for you. I remember tasting metal in my mouth though nothing metal had touched me. Fear invents ingredients. Inside the garage the music kept playing for a few seconds too long. Celebrations are always slow to die. Bilal moved toward the speaker. Small decisions feel like last decisions. One of Samir's friends, Omar, I would later learn his name, gently stopped him and said, "Leave it. Let the night stay honest." Honest. That word hit me hard because honesty had already lost the microphone. I saw the first patrol car stop 2 houses down. Tires whisper before people shout. Winda stood at the end of my driveway still narrating us to her phone like we were characters she had written herself. She repeated, "Armed and dangerous." Twice more. Repetition is the oxygen of Karens. Samir finally told me the truth in fragments. He said they were officers. He said tonight was meant as a thank you dinner. My garage had accidentally become a blue uniform backstage. And suddenly the lie felt heavier, like accusing firefighters of burning the house they protect. The tall, calm men behind me didn't panic. Training teaches you to iron your heartbeat. Omar asked everyone to sit, hands visible, conversation soft. The grill was turned off with ceremonial care. Even the smoke looked nervous. I walked toward Winda to explain because I still believed explanation was a working currency. She didn't lower her phone. Cameras can be more stubborn than people. I said clearly that the guests were police. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Nice try. Nice try." As if my life was a prank channel. 2 more cars arrived. Doors opened like jaws. Officers stepped out already cautious, already prepared for a story darker than my LED strips. The first approaching officer asked who the homeowner was. I raised my hand slowly, like admitting to breathing. Then something beautiful happened in the middle of ugly. Omar walked forward, pulled out his badge, and greeted the officer by name. Streets sometimes introduce their real authors. The vibe flipped so fast it gave me vertigo. Vertigo feels like truth doing push-ups. The responding officer looked at the garage, looked at the guests, and his shoulders dropped their armor. Recognition is a form of ceasefire. One by one Samir's friends introduced themselves properly. Handshakes replaced handcuffs that had been imagined. I watched Winda's face lose color without permission from the HOA. She tried to say she must have misunderstood. Misunderstood doesn't usually involve 911. The approaching officer told her firmly not to make false reports. Firmness can sound like parenthood. Neighbors began appearing at porches, drawn by the lights. HOA streets love theater even while selling silence. My mother came out of the house wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, confused by the audience. I hugged her too tight. Too tight hugs remember too much. The responding officers decided there was no threat, no weapons, no crime, only a party interrupted by imagination with a blonde bob. They even complimented the samosas. Compliments inside siren circles feel illegal but healing. One officer joked we had the safest garage party in the country. I realized how close I had been to a very different headline. Headlines are children raised by adults like Winda. But the story didn't end with the officers leaving. Departures sometimes open new doors. The responding officer asked if I wanted to file a complaint against her. File. Paperwork is the cousin of revenge. I hesitated because I didn't yet know how far she would go to protect her pride. Samir looked at me like he already knew that answer. Pride in HOA neighborhoods can be a second weapon. The officer told us to enjoy the rest of the evening and call if anything else happened. Anything else. Those words would become prophecy by midnight. Because Winda wasn't finished being the main character. As the cars pulled away, she kept standing there, scrolling through her video like searching for a better reality to upload. Reality refused her Wi-Fi. Bilal whispered, "Bro, Karen gonna Karen." I laughed, thinking the tension was finally exhaling. Tension was only changing clothes. And later that night a second 911 call would rise from the same phone. I didn't know a person could double down on a lie like it was a mortgage. The street returned to looking innocent in minutes. Innocence in HOA land is a costume hanging by the door. Bilal restarted the grill, my mother went back inside, and someone finally touched the playlist like reviving a patient after the wrong surgery. We tried to stitch the evening back together, but you can't unhear a lie that already met sirens. Winda walked home dragging her dog and her wounded hero energy. I watched her through the half-open door. Half-open doors now felt like witnesses instead of airflow. Samir's officer friends circled back to humor, asking about the recipe, helping set plates, speaking gently to my mom so she wouldn't feel embarrassed. Embarrassment had chosen the wrong house. I kept thinking about how close we were to real disaster. Disaster often measures distance in centimeters. The responding officer had left kindly, yet procedure still lived in his eyes. Procedure doesn't care that you're a good tenant who trims hedges with obedience. Omar pulled me aside near the cooler. Coolers hear more secrets than therapists. He told me I handled it well. Well, sounded generous for a man whose knees were still shaking. He said false 911 calls were serious. Serious. Like a cliffhanger wearing handcuffs. By 9 o'clock the neighbors relaxed enough to visit. HOE neighborhoods are nosy relatives with landscaping. 2 ladies from across the road brought dessert as if apologizing on behalf of Karen Nation. My mother served tea and asked everyone twice if they were comfortable. Comfort is fragile after accusation storms. Samir explained his months away, police academy, late shifts, discipline training. Discipline. The same word our HOE uses for Flower Heights. Suddenly I felt proud instead of nervous about his friends. Pride can flip faster than a phone screen. But at 9:40 my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown neighbor group chat I didn't even know existed. Apparently the street had a digital porch. Someone wrote that Karen was posting the video online claiming the officers had flashed fake badges. Fake. My stomach dropped again like practicing for a worse exam. Bilal read it and said we should ignore her. Ignoring Karens is the religion of survival. Omar disagreed politely. He said online accusations could escalate the situation when real officers responded again. Again. That word echoed like a second siren rehearsing. I decided not to file a complaint earlier. Decisions made in mercy sometimes beg for refunds. My mother said Allah sees everything. HOE newsletters disagree with Allah too often. At 10:15 I heard shouting outside. Shouting grows better after watching itself online. I stepped out and saw Winda back at my driveway with 2 other HOA board members, Mr. Gregg and Mrs. Thompson, both carrying faces as stiff as approved holiday colors. Stiff faces are HOA uniforms. She announced that the gathering violated community guidelines and she would ensure proper law enforcement involvement. As if she had adopted the 911 button as a child. I told them officers had already cleared the scene. Cleared scenes sometimes stayed dirty in Karen memory. Mr. Gregg said flashing badges without HOA notification was suspicious behavior. Notification. I realized the HOA believed it outranked the Constitution. Omar and 2 friends came out behind me, calm as earlier, greeting the board respectfully. Respect confuses people who feed on control. They offered to show department IDs again. Again the vibe bent toward truth. Winda interrupted loudly, claiming she saw a gun in the garage earlier near the cooler. Cooler lies apparently have second lives. The officers exchanged looks I didn't understand, looks that said procedure was putting boots back on. One officer quietly asked if anyone had moved anything metal-shaped since the first response. Metal-shaped. My garage suddenly felt like a courtroom built from drywall. My mother came out hearing the voices. Voices travel faster toward mothers than Wi-Fi. She asked what was happening. I wanted to answer. Nothing. But HOE storms don't accept that forecast. And right there, in front of the board, Winda pressed 911 a second time, louder, more confident, narrating a brand new version of us. A person rewriting reality live is a terrifying editing software. I felt the night tighten around my throat like an unapproved welcome mat. Because this time the call wouldn't stop at recognition. It would stop at search warrants. I didn't believe second chances could feel like second trials. Trials usually require judges, not neighbors in sandals. The first 911 call had bruised the evening. The second began sharpening knives made from policy. I watched her speak to the dispatcher while staring directly at Omar as if daring the truth to interrupt her again. Dispatchers only hear voices, not reputations. Reputations were bleeding quietly behind me. Omar told everyone to step inside the garage and sit exactly as before. As if recreating the original posture might resurrect the original outcome. But outcomes hate being photocopied. 10 minutes later 3 new patrol cars arrived. Different officers, different shift, same procedure. Procedure had returned with a fresh haircut. The leading officer approached carefully, asking about the reported firearm. Firearms apparently grow in Karen gardens overnight. Samir tried to explain again, showing photos from earlier in the evening, group pictures, smiling faces, academy certificates. Certificates. HOE neighborhoods don't respect certificates unless they approve the frame. The officer listened kindly, yet his radio kept breathing like a restless animal. Then came the request I feared. We need to conduct a precautionary search. Precautionary. My garage turned cold, though the grill was still warm. Bilal looked at the cooler, as if it had betrayed us personally. Coolers don't carry guns. But they carry accusations perfectly. The officers searched slowly, respectfully, lifting chair cushions, opening storage cabinets, checking near the cooler where she swore the gun had lived. Lived guns leave fingerprints. Fingerprints were refusing her fairy tale. Nothing was found. Nothing. That word should have won elections. The leading officer stepped outside to speak with Winda. Speaking outside garages sometimes decides inside destinies. I heard fragments through the side door. She insisted someone must have hidden it in the house. Hidden. As if my mother was running a criminal Airbnb. The officer warned her again about false reporting. Warnings bounce off Karen walls like tennis balls. Mr. Gregg and Mrs. Thompson began arguing with her quietly, telling her to stop embarrassing the board. Boards fear embarrassment more than injustice. She didn't listen. Listening isn't Karen cardio. The officers returned inside saying they were satisfied there was no threat, but advised we wrap up the gathering to avoid further disturbance. Disturbance. My mother asked if they wanted more tea. Tea survives better than parties. Samir's friends helped roll the cars back in and clean the floor. Cleaning a garage after a search feels like washing a wound that never existed. Omar apologized to my mom for the stress. Stress had chosen our house like an uninvited guest. By 11:30 most guests left, hugging Samir, thanking me, promising to come again under quieter circumstances. Circumstances. I realized garages no longer felt sacred, they felt temporary visas. Bilal said the nightmare was over. Over. He used that word too generously, too early, like earlier playlists. Omar told me privately to save all messages and videos in case she escalated again with online complaints. Online complaints are Karen grandchildren. At 11:55 my doorbell rang. Doorbells after midnight carry darker accents. I opened it thinking maybe an officer had forgotten something. Forgotten things sometimes return as detectives. It wasn't detectives. It was Samir reading a new post on his phone where Winda claimed the department was protecting its own and she would contact Internal Affairs and local news by morning. Morning threats grow faster than any hedge I trim. My mother overheard and began crying softly near the kitchen door. Kitchen doors apparently also take sides. Samir hugged her saying he would handle it legally. Legally. Legal fights in HOA land last longer than marriages. I sat alone in the garage staring at the empty spot near the cooler that had hosted an imaginary gun twice now. Imaginary weapons can still shoot real families. And that's when an unmarked car stopped across the road with its headlights off like a breath being held by the entire street. Because the real twist wasn't that officers were inside my garage. The twist was that one of them belonged to Internal Affairs already investigating our HOA for something much bigger. Bigger storms apparently borrow smaller lies as entrances. The entrance was parking silently outside. I learned that darkness with headlights off can feel louder than any siren. The unmarked car sat there like a patient predator enjoying our driveway theater. I kept telling myself Internal Affairs had nothing to do with me. Me. HOAs teach you that investigations are always someone else's weather, until the rain chooses your roof. Samir called Omar to ask about the post. Posts online were apparently multiplying like unsupervised guests. Omar answered calmly and told Samir not to worry about Internal Affairs threats because one of the guests tonight was actually Captain Reyes, an IA supervisor and family friend of another officer. Friends inside garages sometimes carry secret job descriptions. That sentence rewrote the entire evening backward. Backward evenings can suddenly point forward. Captain Reyes had attended as a courtesy, wearing the same plain black t-shirt disguise samosas had trusted. Trusted disguises can be government uniforms. I walked closer to the window, trying not to stare at the unmarked car. Staring is considered cardio for guilty people. Bilal joined me, holding a trash bag like a shield against adulthood. Adulthood was still charging late fees. Then the car door opened and a man stepped out wearing a department jacket. Jackets at midnight have personalities. He looked toward my house but didn't approach yet pauses are investigation punctuation. My mother asked from the kitchen if everything was okay. Okay is a mother-shaped prayer. Samir lied kindly and said it was only a friend visiting. Visiting friends sometimes measure the whole street. Captain Reyes finally called me directly. Direct calls feel like spotlights choosing one actor. He introduced himself properly this time and apologized for the stress caused by Winda. Stress apparently had witnesses I didn't know existed. He said something that froze my breathing. The IA team wasn't here for the party at all. They were already investigating financial misconduct inside our HOA board, illegal fines, selective enforcement, intimidation tactics, and coordinated harassment of minority tenants. Tenants like me apparently had files thicker than hedges. The unmarked car across the road belonged to that active investigation unit conducting neighborhood mapping. My garage party had accidentally gathered half their witness list in one humble cooler circle. Bilal whispered, "Bro, we living inside a Netflix episode." Netflix episodes don't usually include your mother crying near the ironing board. Ironing boards now felt political. Captain Reyes told me to keep all communications saved and not engage with her directly anymore. Direct engagement with Karens is apparently hazardous material. He said the department would handle the false reporting and online defamation as part of their ongoing case. Cases sometimes borrow desserts as evidence. I felt relief and anger sitting together on the same folding chair. Chairs in garages hear revolutions quietly. The grill cooled down like an elder leaving the argument. Samir thanked him sincerely. Sincerity apparently confuses board members more than any constitution. Captain Reyes promised to visit in daylight to explain to my mother so she would understand tonight hadn't been a criminal invitation. Invitations sometimes disguise themselves as investigations. At 12:25 the man in the jacket finally approached my door. Doors after IA calls feel safer yet heavier. He introduced himself as Detective Harris from the Reyes unit, and asked if he could take a brief statement about the online accusations. Statements are garage confessions turned official. I agreed because I realized truth had finally bought a badge that HOA newsletters couldn't scold. Scolded newsletters apparently had their own criminal welcome mats. Detective Harris looked directly at the cooler spot and smiled sadly, saying, "Imaginary guns often expose real criminals." Criminals. I understood he meant the board, not the guests. The evening that began as food and laughter had become the opening paragraph of a much larger justice document. Documents apparently prefer garages that are half open. And somewhere inside her house Karen Nation was preparing for morning news she thought she controlled. Controlled mornings usually rebel. I didn't know garage parties could become witness factories. My brother's vague, training friends had turned into my street's unlikely salvation. Salvation was standing politely on my welcome mat without approved colors. But the final twist would arrive by daylight when the HOA board meeting turned into mass arrests recorded by the same phone that had lied twice. Twice-used phones apparently sometimes tell truth accidentally. And I would be invited to that meeting not as a tenant, but as the complainant who started the chain. Chains of justice often begin with LED strips flickering like nervous hearts. My heart finally exhaled for the first time that night. Night exhalations feel like cliffhangers ending gently. I looked at Samir, realizing the street was no longer hers to police. Police streets apparently sometimes police boards instead. And my sacred garage had become a courtroom wearing samosa perfume. Daylight arrived like an unpaid witness knocking politely. I didn't sleep at all. Kept circling my head the way HOA drones circle trash can violators. My mother brewed strong chai before sunrise, stronger than the neighborhood's sense of control. Control had started sweating overnight. Samir told my mom the full truth this time. Names, badges, Captain Reyes, Detective Harris, the investigation already breathing beneath our perfect lawns. Lawns hide more corruption than basements. She cried again, but these tears had relief inside them. Relief tears taste different from fear tears. By 8:30 the unmarked car returned, this time confident enough to park with visible purpose. Purpose parked better than any car I own. Reyes and Harris invited us to the HOA board meeting scheduled that morning. Scheduled mornings sometimes meet unscheduled destinies. The community center looked normal as always, beige walls, framed certificates about neighborhood harmony. A table with donuts approved by nobody yet eaten by everybody. Everybody kept smiling at us without knowing the plot twist entering through the side door. Winda sat in the front row wearing Victory perfume. Perfume can't disguise procedure. She waved at Mrs. Thompson like a queen greeting subjects who were about to witness a coup. Captain Reyes entered wearing full uniform this time. Uniforms in HOA centers change oxygen levels. He announced the department was present to address false 911 reporting and ongoing financial misconduct. Misconduct. That word hit the room like a gavel borrowed from God. Mr. Gregg tried to interrupt, citing bylaws. Bylaws apparently don't protect felonies. Detective Harris projected documents on the screen, records of illegal fines, bank transfers, coordinated harassment, emails where she planned to scare them with police presence. Presence had receipts now. Neighbors gasped. Gasps travel faster than holiday lights with approved colors. My mother squeezed my hand as if truth still needed parenting. Then procedure finally chose its main characters. Two detectives stepped behind Mr. Gregg and Mrs. Thompson, asking them to stand. Standing orders apparently sometimes sit people down for years. Winda began shouting that this was abuse of authority. Authority abuse experts were ironically being arrested by authority professionals. The same phone rose again, but this time it recorded her own collapse. Harris asked me to give a brief statement in front of the board as the complainant and tenant affected. Affected tenants apparently sometimes affect entire systems. I spoke calmly, though my knees remembered last night. Last nights often attend new mornings. I told them we were careful people trying to celebrate family only. Only. And her lie had endangered real officers and real mothers. Mothers like mine who iron adulthood gently. Detective Harris confirmed no firearms were ever present, and the second call was deliberate fabrication. Fabrications apparently sometimes manufacture prison uniforms instead of sirens. Reyes ordered officers to escort the board members out. Outgoing escorts felt like justice marching in, sandals confiscated. Neighbors began arguing whether the HOA would be dissolved. Dissolved HOAs leave lawns orphaned. My mother asked if she could take the donuts home. Home donuts apparently sometimes attend new beginnings. Samir hugged Omar, who sat in the back smiling like a man watching a plan complete itself. Completed plans often start as grilled chicken. By 10:05 3 board members were formally arrested and charged. HOA charging late fees had finally met state charging real fees. Winda's dog waited outside, confused by the new hierarchy. Hierarchies apparently sometimes bark back. I realized the safest building on our street wasn't the community center or Karen Porch. Porch heroes had retired. It was my humble garage turned witness factory. Factories that produced justice instead of lies. And the dispatcher voice Harris played on the screen repeated her words twice so the room would never forget. Forgetting is HOA religion. Remembering is department religion. Remembering had finally bought a badge with samosa perfume. But one final twist waited. Twists often attend adjournments. Harris announced that another board member not present today was also under investigation and would be arrested by afternoon. Afternoon arrests apparently sometimes borrow mornings as appetizers. I looked at my mother, realizing curtains can't be aggressive. Aggressive curtains accusations had died officially. Officially, my welcome mat had hosted the Constitution without approved colors. I walked into that afternoon like a man attending his own rewritten biography. Biographies in HOA neighborhoods are usually one page of lawn measurements. Mine had grown chapters overnight. The meeting ended, arrests announced, donuts packed by my mother with innocent excitement. Excitement had finally received permission without a newsletter. Detective Horace kept his promise. Promises from real officers don't require approved colors. By 1 p.m. another unmarked car returned carrying Mr. Dalton, the fourth HOA board member who had avoided the morning session, citing medical reasons. Reasons sometimes need better doctors than excuses. Dalton entered the community center confused by the empty chairs where Gregg and Thompson had sat earlier. Empty chairs are loud historians. Horace greeted him calmly and asked about specific bank transfers to a landscaping company owned by his nephew. Nephew businesses apparently sometimes plant handcuffs instead of hedges. Dalton tried the Karen strategy: denial with extra fertilizer. Fertilizer couldn't cover receipts projected again on the screen. Screens in community centers apparently sometimes become mirrors. Horace read his emails aloud where Dalton praised Winda for the first 911 call, saying, "Fear keeps property values high." High property values arguments finally sounded criminal instead of clever. By 1:40 Dalton was escorted out in front of the same neighbors who had watched my driveway theater last night. Last nights often give birth to new afternoons. My mother stood at the door thanking Horace for protecting her son and his friends. Friends who were actually his colleagues. Colleagues sometimes attend family dinners accidentally. The street changed personality in hours. Personalities in HOA land usually change in decades. Reyes and Horace visited my house afterward to speak directly with my mother so she would never fear plain black t-shirts again. Shirts had finally received better reputations than sandals. Omar laughed, saying my garage should apply for historic landmark status. Landmark garages apparently sometimes outrank community centers. My mother cooked a second lunch for them, refusing department per diem politely. Polite refusals taste better than false reporting. That evening local news actually covered the arrests. Covered arrest stories finally covered her instead of us. The reporter asked me outside my garage how it felt to host off-duty officers unknowingly. Unknowingly, I had hosted procedure twice. Knowingly, I hosted justice once. I told the reporter garages are sacred halfway homes where I'm from. And sacred spaces shouldn't meet lies disguised as safety. Safety had finally chosen better heroes than HOA queens. The department filed charges against Winda for 2 false 911 calls and online defamation. Defamation factories had closed officially. She apologized to my mother in front of detectives, crying softly without victory perfume. Perfume had finally lost elections. Neighbors started a petition to reform the entire HOA system on our block. Elections scheduled next month with oversight from Reyes' IA unit. Oversight. HOA oversight experts would now be department-shaped instead of clipboard-shaped. My mother replaced the aggressive curtains with lighter ones and joked she hoped the HOA would approve the new sunlight. Sunlight doesn't ask board members anymore. Samir returned to his academy friends thanking them for attending the dinner that accidentally became a case file. Files apparently sometimes grill chicken before grilling criminals. Bilal helped me clean the garage again, though it had already been cleaned by detectives ceremonially. Ceremonial cleaning after justice feels like prayer rugs being washed gently. Gentle garages now felt sacred again. I realized the real hook of this story wasn't that Karen called 911 on police officers. Officers are used to that weather. The real hook was that a humble family dinner exposed the system bullying an entire street for years. Years of illegal fines finally met one Friday of LED strips. LED strips that flickered like nervous hearts and accidentally guided procedure to the right driveway. Driveways apparently sometimes become runways for justice. And my little brother's vague invitation saved more than a party. Parties are temporary. Mothers are permanent. Permanent mothers finally learn that fear doesn't keep values high. Truth does. Truth parked inside my garage without asking permission from sandals.